Welcome to Curious Minnesota Live. We're recording from the beautiful trailhead at Theodore Wirth Park in Minneapolis today at the second annual Strib Unbound Festival. So thanks to everybody for being here. And if there's any new listeners out there, on Curious Minnesota, we work to answer your questions about the people, places, and culture of Minnesota. And for this event, we asked our listeners to tell us what they've been wondering about the great outdoors in this state. And up first is a question that we got from Gary Isaacson of Burnsville. He told us that he and his family have been to every single one of Minnesota's state parks, so that's quite an achievement. And he said that after two parks closed recently, he's been wondering, is Minnesota going to get a new state park anytime soon? And if we do, where would it be located? So big thanks to Gary for asking this question. Reporter Bob Timmons covers the outdoors for us, and I asked him to look into Gary's question. So thanks for being here, Bob.
Absolutely. Always take cheers in the morning.
I love it. I love it. So I was trying to count up how many state parks I've been to, and I think I've reached 20, which isn't too bad, but I still have a ways to go. But I'm curious, have you been to all of them, Bob?
Yeah, no, I haven't. I don't know if that's going to hurt my legitimacy as an outdoors reporter, but I've been to 25,
nice.
27 if you count a few of the recreation areas.
Yeah.
Like Cuyuna, and there's an iron range, off-road vehicle park as well that's booming. So,
do you have a favorite?
Yeah, you and I were talking about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Like picking your children kind of thing. I have favorites for certain activities because it is really hard to single out one, but Whitewater down near St. Charles, east of Rochester is a great one for hiking, for example, and just a really popular park.
I've heard that that's the place in Minnesota where there are the least number of mosquitoes.
Yeah, true.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, true. There's a window where it might be particularly bad, but so Whitewater I love for the hiking, the bluff hiking. There's some great little camper cabins at Afton that no one by and by uses at certain times of the year that are beautiful and fun little rustic places. So yeah, I've got favorites, kind of based on activity.
Got it. I love it. Well, let's get to Gary's question. To start, I wanted to ask you what happened to the two state parks that closed. I wonder if you can start with Upper Sioux Agency State Park.
Yeah, great question by the Isaacsons, by Gary, and certainly sending us into sort of a remarkable history, a dark history around Upper Sioux Agency, which is now a former state park in southwestern Minnesota. The Upper Sioux Agency got its name because it was created by the U.S. government back in the late 1800s after the Dakota people ceded their land to the U.S. And so this Upper Sioux Agency was created as a place for provisions, annuities, payments to the Dakota people. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but it was a dark period when the U.S. reneged on payments, regular payments, weren't providing provisions. The Dakota people were really struggling, and broadly speaking, it triggered the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862. But Upper Sioux, that unit remained preserved by the Minnesota Historical Society and others, kind of keeping it relevant as a historic marker, but it was certainly a dark historic marker to the Dakota people. In 2023, really led by Governor Walz and Sarah Stroman at the DNR, pushed through a law to close the park and transfer the land, the sacred land, back to the Dakota people. So in 2024, there was a ceremony out in Granite Falls, and Upper Sioux was closed as a state park, and then the land was returned to the Dakota.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I can see why lawmakers felt like that was the right thing to do. What happened to the other park, to the Hill Annex Mine State Park?
It was established when mining was really at a low point in the mid-'80s up on the Iron Range. And it was always understood that there were open mineral leases. And so, knowing that land, there was always a possibility for mining potential, the state turned it back to its sort of form as school trust lands, allowing mining companies to
So it's going to be a mine again.
Yes.
It's interesting because then I was looking at pictures, and it actually is a beautiful park, and there are fossils and reasons to visit. It wasn't like an open pit. It's a different kind of mining.
Yeah, and that area is really just interesting geography. I mean, rolling, and the same way Cuyuna country up near Crosby has been sort of reclaimed. Now it's beautiful mining lakes and so forth. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, okay, so did the state make a plan to open a new park to replace these?
In closing Upper Sioux and transferring the park, the DNR essentially told the people of Granite Falls, we're going to figure out something to replace the park in some way, whether we enhance another park. Ultimately, the state didn't create a new park, but actually opened a wildlife management area up in northern Washington County called Keystone Woods. About 1,800 acres, which is a little more than what Upper Sioux was at the time. And then in addition to that, communities around Granite Falls were given grants. So City of Granite Falls, Yellow Medicine, and Renville counties were all given $500,000 to come up with recreational opportunities in the upper Minnesota Valley area. And so Granite Falls, for example, is working on a big trail project. They pulled in a friends group related to Upper Sioux that's being involved in how they might provide some balance to what they've lost, quote unquote. Yeah.
So there's new lands, although there's hunting allowed at Keystone and some new trails. Right. But I feel like they're not really doing what Gary is asking, creating a new park.
Right.
Does that seem like that's something that would be on the horizon?
Current day now, there's no plans for really establishing a new park. What really has to happen, sometimes it's through individual effort or local demand. There's a group of people locally who are like, hey, let's get this going. I know people. We've got some momentum here. But ultimately, it takes an act of the legislature to authorize and establish a state park. So there's no traditional sort of state park in the offing.
So it sounds like it's this kind of alchemy that has to happen. And you mentioned Itasca. That's our first state park. How did it come about?
Yeah. Again, back to individual effort. You had some people and some big personalities who had a lot of credibility and ultimately, navigated these thorny areas around state land ownership, federal land ownership. Logging was thriving at that time up there, the way a lot of resources were sort of being cut down and things. So there was a lot to navigate. And really, even though the park was established in 1851 by law, it wasn't until well into the 20s and 30s where land entanglements were sort of sorted out, and it's like, okay, the park's a place to really recreate. Yeah.
And then so many trees ended up being preserved there, though.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's still actually among my 25 parks. I have not been to Itasca. No, I know. No.
You have to go. If anyone hasn't been, it's so beautiful to cross the headwaters, and the lake's really clear. So, don't miss it.
Yeah.
Don't miss it. So I'm curious, we had Itasca, and then how did things move from there? Did we get parks kind of rapidly, or was it piece by piece? What's some more history for us?
Yeah, it's a mix of things.
Yeah.
If you go along the timeline, there was a period in the 30s into the 40s during the Depression when there was a lot of federal money, the federal government's trying to put people to work, right? And they're sinking federal money into Minnesota, buying land, putting people to work. Hey, let's work on some of these early state parks, or let's establish some state parks. So even between 1935 and 45, I think there were something like 17 parks, including well-known ones like Gooseberry came online. And then there was a bit of a lull, but then you got into the 60s, and we had something like 16 state parks in the early to mid 60s into the 70s. So there would be these sort of bursts. Certainly politicians, land managers, and others realized they need to have more structure around the park's why. Is this for its natural beauty, or is this for its historical significance? So there was even structure coming along as all these parks were sort of bubbling up, if that makes sense.
That does. I'm curious, were there some parks that maybe we love today where it was a real battle to make them, or a contentious process?
Well, it's been interesting. I would say Tettagooch State Park up on the North Shore is one of my favorites, and then I go back there to volunteer on some of the interior trails and things. But you had private landowners up there, who had a lot of money, and they liked to hunt, and they were maybe graying out, and then like, who's going to take this land? And hey, some people were like, hey, this is an opportunity for perhaps a state park. But Tetagooch, I could go on and on about this, so I'll cut it way down. Tetagooch, which
give us the 101.
Yeah, continues to be the Cliff Notes, continues to be one of the busiest, most visited, most camp parks in the system. Was meant to be about 10,000 acres at the start, and ultimately became, now I think it's like 4,000 to 5,000 acres. But you had a lot of Lake County residents, even county officials, worried about losing tax revenue. They also didn't like the idea of like sort of heavy-handedness of, the state coming in and telling us and buying up land and just creating another state imprint. So there were, there's those sorts of tensions around the development of parks. Not everything is easy, even with some of the most popular spaces.
Got it. So what's been happening more recently?
There's a few interesting things. I think the DNR, Parks and Trails Division, which manages state park, would tell you, like, look, we've got all we can do to handle what we have, and to maintain it and operate it well. That being said, they're also trying to follow trends. There's a real push, for example, for electric sites. They recognize that the RV culture, COVID came and went, and people are still RVing and getting into camping and things like that. There's a new Pyrite campground that has its own designation as the Lake Vermilion State Recreation Area to totally accommodate off-roaders.
Yeah.
And then even Minneopa Park in Mankato, which is a popular park as well, with the Bison Drive and everything like that. They're getting overhauled and electrified and things like that. So there's the things like that are going on park to park. There's a legislation in place right now with the session around creating a memorial state park to honor Mark and Melissa Hortman.
That's interesting.
And so it would be a park managed by the DNR, but unlike a traditional park, there would be no fees or permits, and it would basically be a park down on the Capitol grounds. But certainly, to honor their lives and especially Melissa's commitment to the state.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, that's definitely something to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
And thanks so much, Bob.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. And thanks to Gary Isaacson from Burnsville, who was curious about Minnesota state parks. You can read all of our Curious Minnesota stories online at StarTribune.com. And I'm hoping this inspired you to send me a question. Send me an email and let me know what you're curious about at curious@StarTribune.com. And now, as I always like to say, stay curious. Thank you.